So we're going to start today with our second panel, which is on the question of whether the problem with conspiracy theories is whether it's the theories themselves or the people who believe them, the conspiracy theorists. So this panel concerns an issue which sometimes I would claim goes unnoticed in the literature on conspiracy theories, both within and without philosophy, which is whether when we talk about the apparent problem with belief in conspiracy theories, we are talking about a problem inherent to these things called conspiracy theories, or a problem associated with a kind of people who believe said conspiracy theories. That is, are conspiracy theories problematic beliefs, or is the problem that some of the people who espouse them believe them for the wrong kinds of reasons? Our two panelists, Steve Clarke and Marius Raab, will be discussing this very issue. We had hoped to be joined by Julia Napolitano, but she's been struck down with some kind of illness. Frankly, given what happened with one of the members of our last panel, and now Julia, I'm worried about the well-being of our final set of panelists. We all wish you get well soon. Julia, let me now introduce our panelists. Steve is Professor of Philosophy in the School of Social Work and Art at Charles Sturt University and Senior Research Associate of the Wellcome Centre for Ethics and Humanities at the UHERO Centre for Practical Ethics and the Faculty of Philosophy. I managed to leave off an O there. The UHERO Centre for Practical Ethics and the Faculty of Philosophy at the University of Oxford. He works on a broad range of topics in philosophy. Recent publications include Huckleberry Finn's Conscience, Reckoning with the Invasion in the Journal of Ethics, and along with H. Joni and J. Silvescu, Rethinking Moral Status in Oxford University Press. Our second panelist, Marius, is a postdoc at the Department of General Psychology and Methodology at the University of Bamberg in Germany. His research focuses on the psychological functions of conspiracy theories, the benefits of virtual communication, and gamification. Welcome, Steve and Marius, to our panel on conspiracy theories or conspiracy theorists. I suppose the first question is, are you conspiracy theorists?
Well, I believe some conspiracy theories.
Yeah, aren't we all? So, yeah.
Right, so you're both happy to be labeled as conspiracy theorists. Let me just note that down on my checkboard here. One thing which is kind of interesting about the debate, both within and without philosophy, is that there's still a live debate in the literature as to how we should define what even counts as a conspiracy theory, which you might think is a bit of a problem if we're going to argue that belief in such theories is either irrational or only irrational in some circumstances. Why haven't we managed to settle this definitional debate as to what exactly conspiracy theories are? I'll turn first to you, Steve.
Well, we don't settle many definitional debates in philosophy. We haven't settled the definitional debate about knowledge. So, what chance have we got of settling this one? I mean, I think there's certainly a widespread view amongst philosophers working on the topic that conspiracy theory should be understood as a kind of a subcategory of social scientific theory. And so you want to take a couple of things out of the kind of the folk view. One is the pejorative notion that there's something wrong with a theory because it's a conspiracy theory. And the other is that it necessarily has to be opposed to what's sometimes referred to as an official theory, established theory. So I'm quite happy to call the theory that Al-Qaeda conspired to destroy the World Trade Center a conspiracy theory. It's a theory that involves a conspiracy, okay? Happens to be a very plausible theory, and I happen to believe it. That doesn't take away the fact that it's a conspiracy theory, regardless of whether people think it's a conspiracy theory or not.
So turning from philosophy over to the social science of psychology, Marius, is there any kind of settled notion of the definition operating in the social sciences, do you think?
Well, in psychology, I would say the prevailing definition would be what you would call unwarranted conspiracy theories, so emphasizing the dangers. And that's, yeah, it's a psychology problem, I guess. We are looking for dangers, for correlates in personality, and that doesn't mix well with the notion that many real conspiracies have occurred and are occurring. So we have to take part of this whole set, and it's quite a normative decision for some psychologists, I guess, and that's different line of thinking which doesn't fit with this general notion that maybe conspiracies are real, some are not real, but to get the whole phenomena isn't one of the big points in psychology. We're focusing on problems, on dangers, on normative discussions, what should be and should not be, and that's a stance I'm not so happy always with.
Can I ask a question about that, Marius?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand in psychology, I don't understand much about psychology. I understand there's a positive psychology school that has it that psychology is too negatively focused. Might there not be a sort of positive psychology project to look at the good conspiracy theories and see what goes right when people accurately work out that conspiracies have occurred?
Well, it's, in Germany would say you are running in an open door. So I would say that thinking about hidden features, about hidden structures is one of our core features that makes us human. So we wouldn't have survived if we wouldn't have the cognitive ability to assume things we cannot see. And it can be aesthetically pleasing to find such connections. So that's a positive aspect. It's only a problem when there's anti-Semitic theories or unwarranted theories. That's a real problem. That's also a danger. We see it with QAnon. We see it in Germany with right-wing motivated COVID protests. But the general cognitive mechanism behind it is a positive one, I would say.
Yeah, so this seems to be getting to this particular thing, which I still think is largely untalked about in literature, although Steve will argue he basically solved this back around about 2002, which is the idea that when we're talking about the problem of belief in conspiracy theories, some people are talking about the problem as being conspiracy theories themselves are prima facie bad. Whilst other people go, well, no, there are certain people who are predisposed to believing theories about conspiracies for the wrong kinds of reasons. So when we put the problem of conspiracy theories on the theories themselves, we're ignoring the fact that actually the elephant in the room, so to speak, are the people who espouse those particular beliefs. We should be looking at the kind of attitudinal properties these people have rather than the theories that they believe. Why is it that why is it that we seem to talk about the problem of belief in conspiracy theories as being a problem with conspiracy theories themselves, rather than going, well, look, people believe strange and unusual things all the time, and yet we don't necessarily believe the theories, blame the theories they believe. We rather look for, but why do people have a tendency to believe bad things?
Do you want me to go first on this?
Please. I mean, you've given the of assent.
Right. Well, I mean, you're exactly right that in the first paper I wrote about this, which is going back over 20 years, I was very hard on this distinction between conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorizing, and that's the title of the paper. It was originally set up as a criticism of Brian. I thought in his paper he had blurred this distinction, and I thought that there was some benefit to be made, headway to be made by drawing a distinction. And my basic line is there's nothing wrong with conspiracy theories, okay? They're just a subcategory of social scientific theory. Now, nevertheless, there's an interesting phenomenon. We've got all these crazy people going around believing in, alien lizards, the David Icke theory, or the QAnon people. And there's an interesting phenomenon there to be studied. Now, unfortunately, philosophers aren't best placed to study this. It's the, it's the bailiwick of psychologists and other social scientists. Now, I think that the social sciences have just taken a wrong step because most of them seem head up on attacking conspiracy theories. And what they should be doing is looking at what's going wrong in particular groups of conspiracy theorists and focusing on why they are fixating on the wrong conspiracy theories, and in particular, why they're not giving up these theories when the evidence seems to become overwhelming that the theories are no good.
So, Marius, you kind of indicated in your first answer you've been unhappy with the direction that psychology in particular has taken. So, building off Steve's answer there, why has there been this kind of focus on the theories rather than the theorists, do you think?
Well, there's also a focus on the theorists, but it's either. So it's either they are looking at theorists or at the theorists, but not at the at the function a theory does have for specific people. So most often than not, you have online questionnaires. You are just asking, do you believe that 9/11 was an inside job, and so on. So that's quite superficial, I would say. The complexity of such theories is not heated very much. So there was one really great study by Franks and colleagues where they interviewed people, where they really tried to talk to people. So why do you believe it? What does it give you? What are your further beliefs? Are you active as a political activist? So that's all the stuff isn't usually asked in a psychological questionnaire. It is reduced to just a very condensed core concept of belief in such theories. And when you condense it too much, there isn't much to learn from it, I would say.
It's because, I mean, within psychology, and I think often people either aren't aware of this, or if they're aware of it, they're not quite sure what the distinction is. There's a kind of distinction between qualitative versus quantitative studies of these things. Could you give us a quick gloss as to the difference between a qualitative or a quantitative approach towards the study of these things called conspiracy theories?
Yeah, for quantitative, you would have to have a concept of measurement, and there are some quite established questionnaires out there, and I would agree, they measure something which is related to the phenomenon, but it doesn't cover the whole phenomenon. So you have quite a subset of believing in a sample of theories, but you don't know much about what does it give them, why do you believe, what was your first contact, was there maybe an event in your life where you began to question things. For that, you would have to talk to these people, but it's quite hard. I tried it myself. We succeeded a bit, but most often these people do not want to talk to scientists because they are skeptical. They are saying, okay, you just want to say I'm a conspiracy theorist. You want to say that I'm somehow stupid or I don't believe in the right things. And so bridging this gap or to gain trust would be a prerequisite for qualitative research. And that's quite hard to get. When I say this study by Franks, they described that they went to a Bilderberg conference and were nearly attacked physically just for asking, do you want to talk to us? So it's this polarizing between science and people who believe in conspiracy theories seems to be getting stronger and more extreme. So how do you want to talk to them when they don't trust you? Though that's the problem at the core of qualitative research. And quantitative, you can do it online. You can buy a sample on MTurk. You can say, okay, here's $500, so give me 500 people. answering this questionnaire that's quite hassle-free. But it's only part of the picture, I would say.
Yes, I mean, it's also, unfortunately, along with the worry that the conspiracy theorists you might want to be interviewing may well think the people interviewing them are part of the conspiracy,
yeah.
Which is also the fact that it's a lot easier to do, I mean, financially speaking, it's a lot easier to do studies on MTurks and the like than it is the huge establishment cost of setting up a conversational group, doing the interviews, transcribing the interviews, coding the interviews in particular ways. A survey is a much cheaper way to engage in the study as well.
Yeah. That's unfortunate, but it's most studies I've seen are using MTurk right now, and I don't know if that's a sample that's really representative of most of the people, and maybe it's for the USA, but I guess it's not for the UK, it's not for Germany. So doing it cross-cultural would be a first step. There's some studies doing it, but it's not so many studies doing it, and comparing across cultures what people believe.
And actually, on that cross-cultural thing, this was a question I asked to our panelists yesterday, talking about the kind of weird thing where there's quite a lot of Australasian philosophers who are interested in conspiracy theory compared to the rest of the world. And also the fact that Australasian philosophy has largely been rather sympathetic towards conspiracy theorizing, or at least the idea that conspiracy theories aren't necessarily mad, bad, or dangerous. This is kind of interesting thing when we bring it into this particular kind of study here. So, I mean, what are your individual takes on why there might be a cultural difference for the study of conspiracy theories within your own particular cultural realm? So Steve in Australasia, Marius in Germany or the EU more broadly. Is there something unique about our cultural situation which informs our idea of how we treat these things called conspiracy theories? I'll move to the Australian first with Steve.
So with the use of the word "our" there, was I supposed to include New Zealand and Australia?
Well, that's why I said. That's why initially I said Australasian. But if you just want to talk about Australia, I'm quite happy for you not to make comments about my own.
Well, I don't want to tread on any toes. My experience is when you talk about New Zealanders as if they're Australians, they react like Canadians who are assumed to be Americans. So
it's very true. It's very true. I might just be leading you into a trap.
Look, I really don't know. I mean, it's also part of the subcultural philosophy that's going on here. So maybe it's something to do with the style of philosophy that's done in Australia. Possibly because in Australian philosophy you're supposed to, be fairly not go along with the crowd and disrespect the speaker, no matter how important they're supposed to be. Maybe that makes us more conducive to, taking contrarian views. I'm not sure.
So you take at least the Australian position is very much a position of bucking trends.
Well, I'm thinking so. I mean, I don't want to, despite the fact that you invited me, and I think this might be a bit of a trap, put you and Charles in the same category as, say, me and David Cody and Neil Levy. I think that's true of David and me and Neil. So are there other Australians who work in conspiracy theories?
So Pat Stokes.
Oh, Pat Stokes, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pat, maybe I don't know him well enough to have a sort of strong view. He seems like a perfect nice guy and very sensible, and he understands my views. I'm not believing.
So having said you don't like appeals to authority now, you do.
I said understand. I didn't
yeah,
say. I said he understood it. I didn't say he treated it with.
So you're saying as long as the associate professor understands the views of the professor, it's okay. Yes. just making that clear. But yeah, I mean, I would say that's possibly also true of philosophy in Aotearoa, New Zealand as well. And that's kind of congruent with things that Charles was saying yesterday in the panel. Marius, your particular cultural context here is the kind of work you're doing in psychology in Germany consistent with other German psychologists, or are you an outlier along with the Australasians?
Well, maybe a bit of an outlier. There aren't so many people in Germany really doing research on this. And yeah, it's only a few. You can count them on one hand, I would guess. So every one of us is kind of an outlier. Every one of us has a special focus. But the climate in Germany is, of course, we have the history of the Shoah. We have seen which devastating effects conspiracy theories can at least support, or they can be at the heart of propaganda. So that makes research in Germany in this area, of course, it has to be done very responsibly, and I think it's a good thing that we have to be responsible here, but it's quite peculiar, of course, always this huge historical ideas in the background, and you always have to say, okay, it also limits, of course, our research. We have to be quite sensible not to bring any ideas into an interview where you can say, okay, well, what did you just say? And you gave me an idea. So that's a specific situation here. But on a broader sense, in Europe, I would say we all know Game of Thrones, and most of it is based on real events. So the whole history of our continent is a game and a narrative of intrigue, of conspiracy, of upheaval. So that's a bit in our cultural memory, I would guess. So that makes it also entertaining for some to speculate about these theories, I would guess.
Yes, and actually, I think that brings us back to the earlier point you're making about MTurk and how MTurk might be an appropriate way for engaging in studies maybe in the continental US, where most of the MTurk sample group is located, but maybe the findings from an MTurk sample group in the US isn't going to be particularly appropriate for inferring the beliefs or attitudes of people in the EU, just because of the different kinds of cultural context there. So I suppose that actually gets us to an interesting question. What is it within our particular cultural situations that might lead people to be predisposed towards believing in conspiracy theories, either rationally or irrationally? So given Marius asked the last question, I'll turn that question to Steve. Steve, what at the beginning of this panel, you said you were a conspiracy theorist. Why are you predisposed to believe in conspiracy theories?
Well, I'm not predisposed to believe in them. I happen to believe in some of them when the relevant evidence is presented to me. I believe in the Watergate conspiracy theory. I read Bernstein and Woodward's book, and I found it very persuasive. I thought they laid out the case very well. More specifically, I push this Lakatoshian line. I think if a theory is anticipating evidence and making good predictions which turn out to come true, then that's a very good reason to accept it. Okay. So that's why I believe in some conspiracy theories. Now, I should qualify that I don't believe in terribly many conspiracy theories. So just the sort of very mainstream ones. I'm not going to surprise you by telling you about some outlandish conspiracy theory I believe in.
So, but within the Australian context, then, people who might be predisposed to believe in conspiracy theories, what kind of feature could you give a characterization of the Australian who believes in unwarranted conspiracy theories? What kind of person are they?
Well, I wouldn't want to pick particularly on Australians, because I think the sort of studies that have been done on this are kind of more international. So Joe Osinski's, if I've pronounced his name correct, stuff is quite helpful here. I think people who reason more intuitively and less analytically are more prone to believe in conspiracy theories. And I think the basic thing that's going on is that they're failing to correct their beliefs. They have some sort of intuitive belief, I suspect conspiracy, and then they won't think through, does this conform with evidence? Whereas a more analytically thinking person might do that. I also think, so Osinski's got this memorable line, conspiracy theories are for losers. And I think there's something to this. I think it's someone who perceives themselves as being a bit of an outcast, being, non-elite, is someone who's more prone to think that elites, and possibly government, are conspiring against them.
So, I mean, that seems like the kind of standard characterization we have for conspiracy theorists, but is this a particular problem for conspiracy theorists, or are we simply saying, look, many people who reason intuitively end up with the wrong kind of results? So why pick on conspiracy theorists here as being a special class when you're also going to find the same examples in naive belief in the sciences, or weird appeals to badly done psychological studies?
So are you worried that someone might intuitively accept a scientific theory when they ought to accept it on the basis of relevant evidence? Is that the concern?
I mean, that's one concern. I mean, an example which I've used in the past is lots of people do believe that anthropogenic climate change is occurring, but when you press them on the rationale as to why they believe it, it turns out they believe these things for reasons which really don't stand up to much particular scrutiny. I believe it because my mother-in-law believes it, so I've inherited that belief from her without there being any rationales to think that actually your mother-in-law has the right rationale to believe it in the first place.
Okay, so I mean, this is starting to get into issues of reliance on testimony. So it would be nice if we knew that the mother-in-law had a science degree, studied the relevant science, and had provided reliable testimony. If not, that's somewhat concerning. But we'd have to drill deeper to find out what exactly is going on in that example. But I mean, generally, there are lots of things that can go wrong. We live in a very complex world. There's a lot of evidence that we're trying to sift through, and we end up inevitably doing a lot of it intuitively. So, and this is kind of good because it gives us quick and dirty solutions to problems we need to sort of move on with, but it also leaves us open to a lot of pitfalls, like getting stuck on crazy conspiracy theories.
So, Marius, turning the question back towards you. So, what are the kind of characteristics that people tend to associate with the irrational predisposition towards belief in conspiracy theories?
Well, the general belief would be those are stupid people, those are people who don't get a grip on reality or who can't handle the complexity of the world. So it's a rather negative stereotype. But I would take an example of the protests against the COVID measures in Germany. There has been an empirical study about these people, what motivates them and who are they at all. And it was quite interesting. It was most of the people who are, and it's thousands of them right now on the streets in Germany. Most of them are college level or higher, many with a PhD, many successful engineers, lawyers. So it's not the 1%, but I would say maybe the upper 10%, which is on the streets right now, claiming that the government is hiding something, that it's a pandemic, that it's that COVID is maybe it's real, but it's exaggerated, they would say. So it's all these stereotypes we have about conspiracy theorists at least fail for this movement right now in Germany, which is protesting against the COVID-19 measures. So there's a mismatch between stereotype and the empirical research done. Who is on the streets right now?
Yes, and I do actually wonder whether, given the young history of the study of conspiracy theory, particularly within the social sciences, but I mean, people will say the same argument for the humanities as well, we might be operating with very quick and hasty generalizations, which are going to be tested by the fact that the more time we spend looking at the phenomena, the more we'll realize those initial generalizations may not have been accurate in the first place.
Yeah, it's and maybe we all know one person who has talked to us about hours after hours about maybe that JFK was shot by the CIA and that birds aren't real and shape-shifting aliens. And this is so exhausting sometimes that it's maybe a human tendency to do a generalization and say all people who believe in conspiracy theories are some kind of people who are talking to you hours after hours. But that's a fallacy, of course, and one we should in academia be aware of and try to circumvent it. So
yes, and I mean, it seems that one thing which is kind of interesting about the pandemic has been the number of, and this is one of those terrible stereotypes or caricatures, but everyone seems to now know someone who they thought was really clued up, really on the level when it came to understanding issues, who nonetheless has gone down the metaphorical rabbit hole into some particular conspiracy theory about either the purpose of COVID-19, the origin of COVID-19, or some particular view on vaccine mandates or mask mandates, which does seem to be kind of testing the stereotype we often have about conspiracy theorists. Although conversely, people like Joe Usinski, going back to Steve's point, have actually argued that actually we shouldn't be surprised by this because this was true in the 1980s, this was true in the 1970s, this was true in the 1960s. Lots of supposedly, and I'll put in scare quotes here, sensible people believe, scare quotes, conspiracy theories all the time. Is there a kind of problem in the literature that we're not paying as enough attention to the history of conspiracy theory in our relevant cultures over time?
Yes, very much so. So one big thing, people get a lot of hysteria about the internet, for example. So oh my God, the internet's spreading conspiracy theories left, right, and centre. So this is another thing Usinski's quite good on. There's just not more belief in conspiracy theories these days than there was in the 70s or the 80s or in the 19th century. I think it pays to understand how long crazy conspiracy theories have had currency, because this is a corrective to thinking that they've kind of sprung out of nowhere, and this is some new phenomenon that you might sort of actually think, oh, this is a new phenomenon. We have to look at what has happened recently. Some new technologies occurred that has caused this. When actually what you need to do is understand your history and understand what we've always been like.
Yes, I mean, it's one thing which I've certainly found when talking with journalists about the apparent problem of conspiracy theories here and now is if you point them to the kind of survey data that Joe has engaged in with the Pew Research Center.
You're frozen.
Ooh. Oops, we may have lost him there. It's a nice look on his face.
Yes, he looks like he's about to make a very important point.
So
well, maybe you can take over as.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm here for. I'm the co-pilot. Actually, so I'm curious. Charles has been chiming in the Q&A.
He's got a lot of comments.
A lot of things. Yeah. I mean, actually, my looking at them, Steve, there's a question, the very first question for you. He asks, would a theory about why people believe in warranted conspiracy theories have much content? This was something you suggested earlier, that we should not just look at why people believe in the bad conspiracy theories, but consider looking at why people believe whatever they believe. And yeah, it has one of my favorite examples from Dan Dennett, right? That what about the theory why in every culture people throw spears the pointy end first? It's kind of wouldn't be a lot to that theory.
Well, I mean, there's still things to be said. Like, for example, Indigenous Australians have this thing called the woomera, which is basically a spear-throwing enhancer that enables them to throw the things further. So, I mean, what my point is that there's still things to be said about how quickly and how accurately people acquire belief in true conspiracy theories. So, how long did it take you to, this is going back a long time, to grasp that the Watergate hoax really was, the Watergate burglary really was a conspiracy? How long did it take you to understand that Tony Blair and George Bush really were making shit up about Saddam Hussein's connections with Al-Qaeda, which were non-existent, in order to justify a invasion of Iraq? That's useful information. Some people get onto these things too quickly. Some people acquire these beliefs too late. Some people hit the sweet spot, and we'd like to know, what is it about them that gets them there at the appropriate time.
So looks like some of Charles's points are more just points of information.
Yes, he's adding information to my thing about Australian and New Zealand philosophy, which is useful information. He knows what he's talking about.
Yes. All right.
He's got some theories about Game of Thrones as well.
I don't know if M will come back, but maybe as a little side note, what Charles has written here in the Q&A. Yeah, psychology often was confined to testing undergraduate students, the guinea pigs of psychology, but now it's a bit, it's shifting towards MTurk because it's even easier to get a large sample on MTurk than acquiring undergraduates for filling out questionnaires. So, and that's a problem because when I said that for this movements in Germany about COVID-19, that's mostly, or there are many successful engineers and lawyers and so on those are not the people who will fill out MTurk and questionnaires for maybe €8 per hour. So you don't get them with this means of sampling. And so our view is quite narrow, I'm afraid.
Yeah, so I just found out M was able to hear us and could see us, but was not kind of trapped in this netherworld of not being able to talk. So M is logging out and is going to log back in again.
Well, here he comes.
Yep, it's coming back.
Here they come.
But Marius, I was kind of curious, when you tell your country people about that you study conspiracy theories, what kind of reaction do you get in terms of it's about time somebody studies these things, or isn't that just an American phenomenon, or what kind of how is what you're doing seen amongst other folks in Germany?
It depends a bit of the stereotype. Some think of 9/11 and some think of X-Files, some think of JFK or moon landing, or that the earth is flat. So according to the stereotype the people in question have, it depends on how I'm judged at first sight, what my research is all about. So it's kind of like a play of dice. So sometimes I'm lucky and it's a nice discussion, and sometimes I'm met with distrust or suspicion. So what? That's an academic research, really? Are you sure? So, yeah. But I guess that's true for most of us when meeting people and they hear what we are doing research about.
Okay, so we've got a square for M,
but no audio.
Yeah, I'm just messaging. Okay, so M is going to still work on that. Curious if folks in the audience want to pose any questions. Feel free to make use of the Q&A to plug information in. I mean, well, one thought I had thinking about some of the earlier discussion about why, M's earlier question about focusing on theories versus focusing on theorists and why we do one or the other. And I can't help but thinking that part of the reason the things scientists and others focus on are the thing that they can actually identify, right? And easily identify. So when it comes to something like people in the midst of a psychotic break, or people experiencing schizophrenia, we might focus on the individuals because we can point those people out and would say like, oh, and the actual delusions they might have are different from person to person to person, but we can identify the individuals. And so then we focus on the individuals as a group. When it comes to conspiracy theories, it seems it's very much the opposite, right? It's like you can't look at somebody or look at their photo and determine, oh, that's a conspiracy theorist. The thing that we seem to be able to get our heads around is, are the classic conspiracy theories, like, some people believe in QAnon, some people believe in 9/11, the thing that you're able to identify and actually point at is the theories themselves, because there isn't anything necessarily that marks the actual theorist. And if anything, I mean, we've had less talk about this from the social psychologists in recent years, but this idea that there might not be anything interestingly in common about people who are conspiracy theorists, that they're well spread in the environment in the terms of but they're so we might have so, but it looked like Steve wanted to say something about that.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I think part of what's going on is that really social scientists and psychologists don't actually want to discuss conspiracy theories at all. So by stipulating that they're all unwarranted or they're all no good, they set that aside, and then they can get down to the business of doing psychology, doing social science, and looking at the actual people. So I think there's something a bit misleading about this, that philosophers, sort of have read these psychology papers, social science papers, and say, oh, all conspiracy theories are no good, and steam comes out of our ears. But actually, all they're doing is stipulating that away, so they don't have to worry about theories. So I think, you know, this has to be read in that light. They're not doing philosophy, so we shouldn't be too worried that they're making these sort of sweeping claims.
But at the same time, think about how, I mean, and again, Marius, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you are a psychologist who wants to study conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists, isn't the way that you identify them is you give them a questionnaire where you list off, you know, some subset of conspiracy theories and go, tell me whether you believe in these 16 things. And then depending on how they score, then you go, yeah, that's the person I want to talk to and put into my group and start studying. That it's almost baked into the methodology that, you know, the screening to get into the study is usually belief or a familiarity or assent to specific, you know, classic conspiracy theories. Because again, you just can't point a gun or a gun. You can't point a device at people and go, okay, you're a conspiracy theorist. I've spotted that in your brain waves or something like that. It's we pre-screen them by, you know, do you believe in these 16 things? And if you do, we'd like to talk to you more.
On the other hand, when you talk to any person long enough, you will notice they have one or the other theory which might qualify. So usually we don't do any screening. We just talk to people. We maybe say, okay, we want to talk about alternative medicine. And then when you talk to anyone believing in alternative medicine, you will see that there are some beliefs that might qualify as a conspiracy theory, maybe a warranted one, maybe personal experience with doctors that didn't treat one wrong, that didn't do a thorough diagnosis, and then they turn to other people in the alternative field and they were understood, they were diagnosed, and so it's maybe warranted that when they say, oh yeah, most doctors just are looking for the money and aren't interested in patients anymore. So any of us has, I would guess, the one or the other belief, which another one would say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. So such a screening isn't in most cases even necessary, I would say.
So since it looks like M is back, let me turn things back over to M because we're getting close to the end of our time, another 7 minutes or so. Welcome back.
Luckily, I've heard everything, so I've been here the entire time. It's just that there's a particular issue we have with the internet here. Our download speeds are fantastic. Our upload speeds are not so great from time to time, and Zoom doesn't cope if your upload speed drops beneath a particular threshold, and it just makes you appear as if you're completely frozen, but you can hear everything. It's kind of like paralysis. But Brian, your question actually is going precisely where I was intending to go, which, to make a shorter version of it, maybe part of the problem is what we're looking here is a difference between instances of these things called conspiracy theories, which philosophers have been going, well, when we define a conspiracy theory as being this particular thing here, we're going to identify instances of warranted or unwarranted examples of conspiracy theories and discourse. Well, maybe what's going on in the social sciences is because, no, we're interested in the label. When people apply the label conspiracy theory or conspiracy theorist in conversation to particular people or to particular theories, we want to understand what's going on with that labeling practice there. You know, what is the central characteristic of a conspiracy theory or theorist in ordinary conversation? Not that highfalutin academic jargon that maybe philosophers engage in. So maybe the problem when we're talking about the apparent problem of belief in conspiracy theories is that we literally are studying what appear to be very different things in the social science humanities divide.
So maybe for the label, sometimes it's kind of a cop-out. So you say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist, and that somehow exculpates you from looking at the arguments any further. So it's we all know that it's used when it's used in a as a term to somehow signify this person isn't in the right mind or so. But then it's a cop out, because when I would discuss with anyone who is opposed to vaccinations, I guess I would come to a point where the other one knows more about the topic than me, because I will be honest, I trust in Germany, it's the Robert Koch Institute, it's like the CDC in the US of A. So I trust these people, I trust they're doing thorough research. And when I say, okay, the vaccination is safe, I will get it. So, and anyone who has spent hours and hours about this topic may know more about it than me. So when I say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory, it's a cop out for me to not engage in a discussion any further, because I might be losing ground. That's sometimes a motivation to apply this label, I guess.
I mean, as you also pointed out when you were talking about the way in which these studies are done, occasionally there will be cases where you go, well, this person also seems to believe something very close to a conspiracy theory here, but they're not in the target group we want to get in. So we're already going, well, you know, there are conspiracy theories, and then there are conspiracy theories. And you might go in the same way, there are conspiracy theorists and there are also conspiracy theorists. And there's also a motivated putting people in or out of that label, depending on the object of study that you're engaged in.
Well, for me, I would say no, because I couldn't draw that line. It's impossible to, well, you could people hand some questionnaire and then say, okay, the cutoff is, as Brian said, maybe 10 of 16. So they are heavy believers, or that would be completely arbitrary. So such a distinction would be hard to justify, I would say.
So we'll turn finally to Steve, although I'm getting a connection is unstable again. So if I disappear again, it's not due to a large-scale conspiracy. It's just due to bad internet, which is more the function of bad infrastructure than anything else. Steve, any final thoughts?
Any final thoughts?
Yes, before you get demoted to only being an attendee, because this promotion was only a momentary thing.
Did you mute him, Steve?
No, Steve, you've managed to mute yourself.
Well, I didn't intend to mute myself. That was a little conspiracy going on. Yeah, look, I mean, I think the distinction between conspiracy theorists and conspiracy theorizing remains important. I think a lot of people come to, when they're philosophizing about the subject matter, come to grief because they blur the distinction in a bad way. So I just want to make a pitch for its continued importance, and for philosophers working on the broad topic to pay attention to it.
Thank you, Steve. And thank you to both of our panelists for an interesting discussion, which I was here for the entire duration of, even if there were powers in the background that were stopping me from actually asking my pointed questions or directing things. So Brian did an admirably good job of asking the questions I was going to ask anyway, or at least that's what I'm claiming I was going to do. Who knows what my original intentions were. We'll now be taking a 20-minute break, and we'll be starting the next session at 20 past the hour. We have 3 exciting talks, including myself, along with Martin Orr and Jenna Husting, where we will be talking about this whole labeling thing and the whole issue between how exactly we're testing what we're talking about when we talk about the apparent problem of conspiracy theories. Because as I said at the beginning of this session, this is still a live issue in the literature today, and it would be quite nice if we could try and resolve it at some point in the near future, although my suspicion is we probably won't.